welcome to the 17th episode of the Sydney Contrarian, titled The Truly First World Problem, and this is the third episode of the series, Has Our Australian Education System Failed Society? Now, this particular issue that I'm going to address today may be upsetting to some of us, especially if you are in the if you're a teacher, you're in the education industry, or if you're a concerned parent, or you are one of the students coming out of the system or came out of the system. Now, either way, even if you get upset, well, the hard truth have to actually be talked about. And the facts, as well as also my opinions, I would like people to perhaps provide me with comments on your thoughts, even if you disagree. And hopefully I'll be able to start some dialogue of sorts with my listeners. Okay, why do I ask this question, has Australian education failed society? It's simple, because when we look at the way the general Australian society is approaching life and the way they process information, and also the way our young men and women are growing up, I suspect there's something to be said about what have we done to these people in their younger years. What have they been learning at school, if they had gone to school, and how is the system designed such that these people have actually come out of society, and on one hand they may have gotten good marks, a degree, and have a job that can pay the bills, but there's just something lacking in the way they deal with common sense, or the way they're so easily swayed by so-called experts or politicians who are actually not acting in their best interests. So, on what capacity can I speak in such a way that I have so far? Well, I came through this Australian education system back in the 90s, and I was in university where I got two double bachelor degrees and a postgraduate degree in finance and risk management related field. I also have taught in universities for a number of years, and in these past 5 years, especially as I encounter students coming through the high school system, I could see there was a significant drop in standards, and I'm not the only one to realize this either. So let's trace back to the Australian education system probably in the past 30 or 40 years. Back then, in the 70s, if I understand correctly, the government actually made education as a vocation that was quite sought after and highly valued. How did they do that? They offered scholarships to high school leavers and people who were entering into university. I remember that a number of my teachers who I had in high school, they actually they were beneficiaries of this particular scholarship scheme. Some of them wanted to do engineering. Someone, I think, was actually an Olympic, I think at least a national level sports person. And they decided, because the government was offering these scholarships, they would actually go into education. And when they taught the curriculum, I actually thought that they knew their stuff. Now, as a student during those times, of course, any teacher that taught me would actually give me the impression that they knew their stuff. You had to have a pretty incompetent teacher to actually come out in front of students who are half their age and maybe a third of their age at that time and appear to not know their work. Now, that being said, having actually come through the system and are out of the system 15, 20 years already, and I look back at that curriculum, I still stand by my view that a lot of these teachers were quite competent in their knowledge. However, I still remember that over time, academic excellence in schools became a second or third priority to other priorities, namely the first one being sports and arts. And secondly, there was this increasing discussion about getting students to be community minded, which meant, of course, I'm talking about slowly moving towards something called social justice, which is different to justice, I must also clarify. And I'm going to just trail off a little bit onto this tangent. What is justice and social justice? Now, justice is simply a discussion like a view or a situation where something is deemed fair. There is equal treatment of individuals or cases, whereas social justice is equality of outcomes. In other words, it doesn't matter what people's situations are, the outcome must be the same for everyone. Which means, in other words, I'll give you an easy example. In a race, equal opportunity means everyone starts from the same starting point. And the winner is the one who's able to complete in the shortest amount of time. And everyone is on a level playing field. Social justice is that everyone must finish at the same time. So therefore, there is you actually end up having to go and tamper with where people start, how people are allowed to run, and you have to ensure ultimately everyone gets to finish at the same time. Can you see that there is a significant difference then between the two processes that lead to justice and social justice? Now, skipping back to it, what I was talking about, schools slowly headed towards more on sports and social justice and arts and academic excellence. Even though you hear a lot of teachers and you hear people defending that, yes, Australian schools are still very much aiming to deliver the best students in terms of academic knowledge. But if that is the case, I question the way we recognize academic excellence and also achievement in terms of like sporting achievement. Back in 1996, and there was on the 8th of January, the Daily Telegraph in Sydney was embroiled in a scandal because they reported that a particular high school, Mount Druitt High School, they had all the students of that year scored a TER or tertiary entrance ranking of below 50, the highest being 44.4. And on the headline, they had the photograph of the year 12 students in Mount Druitt High School and said, the class we failed. And what it was implying was that a TER below 50 implied that everyone failed. This is nothing further from the truth, especially because the tertiary entrance ranking was an index representing the proportion of students that you perform better than who sat the HSC with you. So you could technically have, if you have a strong candidature that year, everyone could have passed, but a person who scored 20 TER just meant that he or she was better than 20% of the people who sat the HSC. So this indignation from the students and also the general community that these people were shamed for it wrongfully for their academic results became a huge scandal, and the Mount Druitt High School students actually took the Daily Telegraph to the court. And eventually they had to pay for defamation, and from there on, the newspapers no longer published performance of students, the top performance by TER, or their university entrance ranking, which was adjusted in the future years, for fear that the media could misconstrue these rankings and therefore shame people on things that it doesn't reflect it. Now, I find this absolutely egregious on a few fronts. Now, the first one is, how in the world could the journalists from the Daily Telegraph actually not understand what the tertiary entrance ranking was, being an index? And even if one journalist got this wrong, why is it that I'm sure they had proofreaders, I'm sure they had reviewers before they published it. Why didn't they have someone who actually knew this and said to the journalist, you better change this because it is not right. Now, secondly, the issue is on the topic of shaming students who don't perform well because their score is not high. Well, do we actually not publish the finishing time or the score points of the winning team in a sporting event because it will make the losing team, or people who didn't even qualify for that sporting match, or the general public who aspire to be good at sports but can't, make them actually feel ashamed? Where's equality in that? Where's that idea of a fair go for everyone? And thirdly, the fact that the newspapers, when they faced this type of allegation and then lost the battle, they decided, let's not report this anymore. It's actually showing to the general public that their reputation is more important than the future generations, recognizing a future generation of high achievers academically. That's not important anymore. So what it's signaling then to the general public is academic performance isn't really as important as sporting achievements in the arts. So while schools still recognize high achievers within their own school, the fact that the community doesn't celebrate in this the same way that sports people do is a very telling message to people who study hard or do well, that sorry, you don't really matter too much to us that much. And while it's wrong to say, while one should not actually study hard and get good marks because that will be a way for you to be recognized publicly, people shouldn't be doing that just for the sake of vainglory. It still does send a message to our society what we value and what we don't value. Now, the second thing that I also want to bring up is from there on, we also, if you go and have a look at university courses and minimum entry requirements, go to most universities and you see that education degrees tend to be one of the lowest, like the courses which have the lowest entry requirements. So what we're actually seeing here, and in contrast to what we saw in the 1970s, where you would actually get the cream of high school leavers to go and become teachers, you actually now have people who didn't do you're more likely to have people who don't do well in high school who still want to get into university, and one of their possible choices among a few that they have is in education. And that is really scary. The reason why I say it's really scary is no longer are they using a net to capture the top of the top of the classes. They are actually now scooping from the bottom of the barrel. Now, in having said that, I want to clarify, there are still high achievers from high school who have that vision to go and become a teacher in the education system. And I know a few myself, and one of them whom I know is Eddie Wu, who is this year's Young Australia of the Year, and he has also been recognized internationally for his dedication in teaching mathematics and his innovation. He's now joined the Department of Education, and I'm aware recently one of his initiatives is actually to use mathematics to teach our young generation how to apply in managing their finances, which is something which is long. It's been long-standing. Why aren't we even addressing this in the first place? But to the Department of Education's credit, and of course to Eddie Wu's credit, we have someone who's of high caliber, who hopefully can help steer the education system around, at least on this front, to get our students to be more finance savvy and find maths more engaging. But on the other hand, when we have a bulk of people who are in universities doing an education degree who are not performing well, and they're going to come out because universities can't fail like 40, 50, 60% of the people who enter into a course, because that would be bad publicity. We're going to end up you have this. Either the students drop out of these degrees because they found it too hard to cope with the material that they had trouble as a student in high school understanding, and then they have to end up teaching it. Universities have to water down their standards in order to pass these people and maintain an image, and a superficial image that is, that they are actually still getting good quality people coming into university and graduating these people out and sending them out into the Board of Studies and into our public or private school system. So herein lies a problem. When you have an increasing number of underqualified teachers under their previous standard when they were a student, coming out to be teachers, and you have a curriculum that they have to teach, and they can't actually say to the students, they can't walk into a classroom and go, ladies and gentlemen, I actually don't understand this bit because I didn't really learn it, or I didn't do well in it in high school. That's not going to happen. So what would they have to do? They have to go and rewrite part of the curriculum. They're going to have to take out parts of the curriculum in order that the teachers don't appear that they fail. So then students who are learning under this system think that they're doing things of the same standard over the period, over these past 30, 40 years. But these students who are coming through the high school system come into university, and every 5 years or so, you notice that there is a significant drop in the standard, and universities will have to respond similarly by adjusting down their teaching standard and also what content they put in. I also find that quite funny, and unfortunately it really isn't funny when you understand what is happening about the way we measure our high school leavers. And I talked about this in an earlier episode, I think episode 8, about our education system and the use of the current Australian tertiary admission rank, ATAR, which replaced the University Admissions Index, the UAI, in 2009, and the UAI had replaced the Tertiary Entrance Rank TER back in 1998. At each time they changed the definition of the rank, they actually ended up adding they're actually adding points to the people who finished the high school certificate because they included into that sample more and more students who did not sit the high school certificate or the leaving certificate, so that people who finish automatically get a default handicap. Now, an index is a statistical measure, and it's between 0 to 100. And by definition, the median is 50. And if you're saying that people, if there's a large number of people, the standard would be a bell curve, and it would be symmetric. Bell curve being a normal curve. So you would say the average should not be too far away from the median of 50. Except if you go to the UAC or the University Admission Center website, you'll see that the average ATAR nowadays is 70. Now, if they say the average is 70, you can be sure that the median is not is not 50. It's definitely much higher. And the reason is, they say it's based on those who started high school in year 7 and we're saying we're ranking people who finish the HSC relative to people who start year 7. This is ridiculous, because those who drop out of high school don't score an ATAR, and those who finish the high school certificate, even if they do very badly, are automatically going to get boosted simply by because there are people who did not finish. Now, when you look at the university minimum entry requirement for university courses, that's the same thing. In order that the universities look like they're maintaining a standard, they usually keep the minimum requirement for the minimum ATAR requirement around the same. They might push it up a little bit, but definitely not to a point where it's actually maintaining the standard from 10, 15 years ago. This is also why you now have a burgeoning population of university undergraduates who are going into university thinking that they are like the people who went into universities in the 80s and 90s, who were actually quite intelligent, self-motivated, and were, correctly said, an elite bunch. Nowadays, people get the score similar to the elite bunch, but there is the difference between the two groups of people are far and beyond. Now, how can we tell? Just go into a university and look at the number of people who turn up to classes, the number of people who are hanging around the university watering hole or the pub, or how many of them are simply just sitting around on the grass with their notebooks, and you walk past and look at what they're doing in the notebooks. They are not likely to be doing their university work. Now, moving out of the topic of the high school education system feeding into university, I would like to look also at the curriculum as well. The curriculum is also similarly setting up our society to continue down this rather dreadful spiral of increasingly people come out being deceived into thinking that they actually are intellectual and are intelligent. Why? Because the curriculum has slowly been replaced from being rigorous on a technical side like mathematics and science. It's being moved from being technically rigorous to being rather soft. And I do understand that there is a move in the New South Wales Department of Education that they're trying to go back to basics in mathematics, especially, so that there is some rigor and that they're bringing in statistics. But with science, there is a huge problem with science. And especially with public schools, one of the biggest concern I have with public schools is they are teaching fraudulent material. The fraudulent material being the pseudoscience, science slash, it's a religious form of science which they call evolution theory, which they call scientific. And how is that a problem? It's because back in the 18th, so Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was proposed in 1859, and one of his fellow supporters, Hegel, it's not George Hegel, but no, anyway, the first name doesn't matter, because if you look him up, you'll find it. Followed on and developed Darwin's theory of evolution by saying that human embryos have gill slits like fish, and this is also similar for embryos of dogs and other animals. And if you go to science textbooks, you realize all these science textbooks continue to say that this is scientific, except if one goes and traces the history, is that Hegel was actually caught by the academic industry. Like the university academics actually caught Hegel committing intellectual fraud in 1874, because what he actually had done was the embryos that he drew of humans and other animals, they were actually plagiarized off some other artists, and then he made some changes so that they all look similar when in fact they're not. And if you are actually a doctor who's like a gynecologist, for example, and you're looking at the x-rays of embryos, you will see that the human embryo, and if you compare it to embryos of other animals, they do not look the same. And it's also been accepted that the so-called gill slits is actually not gill slits, but they are actually folds of skin. And I think there are certain bones which are fused into the body as the embryo develops. Furthermore, they're also teaching in the schools evolution and saying that they follow the Greco-Roman philosophy of universalism, and so therefore they say that things continue and prevail for over a very, very long period of time, and change occurs very slowly, except there's nothing further from the truth. For example, the Grand Canyon, they say that the Grand Canyon was carved through thousands of years, millions of years of a river flowing through that canyon, except it's already been proven, for example, that the Grand Canyons, the Colorado, the mouth of the Grand Canyon relative to like when you enter the Grand Canyon and the end of the Grand Canyon is actually higher at the entrance, lower at the entrance and higher at the end of the Grand Canyon, which would suggest that the Colorado River must flow backwards. It must flow uphill. There's actually a lot of these types of inconsistencies in these science textbooks that are being taught. And why am I picking on this as being an issue on our education system failing society? It's simple. Because this idea that our universe and our planet and individuals and animals all came out of nowhere, and it also is developed over millions of years, it flies in the face of evidence. What it's trying to say is that there is no God. So there is actually no higher authority that we're answerable to, and you're teaching the younger generation. The authority is that of the teacher in the classroom. The authority is that of the government. Now, children are not stupid, but children are impressionable. And what I mean when I say children are impressionable, they will actually believe that students are indeed, the teachers are indeed to be trusted. And they are also not stupid in that these young children do go and watch TV. They are exposed to a lot of things now, especially the internet. And if they watch the news or they read the newspapers, even at the age of 10, let's say, and they realize that you have another government official who's caught for corruption or pedophilia, abusing little children sexually, or they're caught stealing, or even in cases where the teachers in their own school or the principal is arrested for a crime. And I went through that. When I was in year 6, my principal disappeared, and a few months later it was reported that he was actually a pedophile. Now that really does a lot to destroy a child's trust and respect for authorities. And when you're saying that these are the only authorities you have because everything came out of nowhere, is it no surprise that these young children are not going to respect authority and they're going to be harder to manage, and a lot more of them are going to be more rebellious, and they will also look, and also when given the opportunity to have a say in society, they're more likely to want to dismantle the existing structure of society because they say, well, back when I was a child, I was told these things, and then later I saw these people lied to me. The only reason why they lied is because in their position of authority, they're able to get benefits. So screw them, get rid of them, and furthermore, all these things that they thought were right, they're wrong. So we're gonna change the fabric of society. So you got changing the fabric of society, such as marriage. You destroy marriage because back then they would say don't have sex before marriage, and then you have people who are supposed to uphold society, uphold the moral standard in society, such as government officials, the teachers, and people that they respect. They go and have affairs, or they father a child with another person before divorcing their own, or they say like all through this they go, well, yeah, they're telling me not that it's like do as I say, but don't do as I do. So therefore, when they're given a chance, they're going to say, well, marriage failed because I saw these people virtue signal to me about marriage, and they don't support it. So marriage can be anything we want. It's anything we like. The other one is the sacrosanctity of life in terms of abortion and euthanasia. As much as one would say that in a civilized society we shouldn't have the death penalty, but when you actually think about it, when you remove the death penalty for certain crimes such as murder, rape, and abuse, serious child abuse, you're actually saying to society that certain lives are more important than others. And young children have been taught in schools that the death penalty is uncivilized, and if people want to die, they should be given the dignity to die. They should be allowed to take their own life. So is it also no surprise that when young men and women, especially in their teenage years, are facing significant stresses in their life, they suddenly remember the enlightened teachings of in the classroom that you should support people to die with dignity, then they're not going to actually give it a go. They're going to go and take their life because that's the easier way out, and they think that's fine. Sure, some of you might challenge me in saying, well, these are extreme examples, aren't they? And you're just taking a straw man and beating it to the death. But no, if you truly believe that, then you are actually living a very privileged life. And we are in a big city living very privileged lives because we don't have to face the elements. We turn the knob and water comes out of our taps. If we're hungry, we can go to our supermarkets and get our food. And if you want entertainment, you can just flick on your Netflix and whatever. We have no idea really about the true hardships of life. And to say that we should that people should be encouraged to take their life for whatever reason, even if they're suffering in illnesses, I still believe humans have no right taking the life of other people, of another. And it sounds very unsympathetic, but when you're teaching young children these types of issues without actually weighing it up, you're actually just telling them this is good and this is bad, and they're not actually given the time to weigh things up, and there is no standard because there is no God in a public school, then they're going to listen to teachers and government. But well, if you actually read the Bible, then it's very clear. The sixth commandment is thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder, depending on which version of the Bible you look at. Trying to reason things out by saying that this is not really murder, especially in the case of abortion. And schools are definitely, school teachers, I believe, have one of the biggest responsibilities for misleading young children about abortion, in that it is the right of a woman. And I'm going to also bring on this issue about public schools being a hotbed of left-leaning progressive ideology of equality of opportunity, no, equality of outcome, sorry, not equality of opportunity. They're throwing away equality of opportunity, replacing with equality of outcomes, social justice, and they're saying, and basically, they're trying to destroy the fabric of society by saying that males are generally the cause of the problems in society because they're more violent, they dominate more of the high positions so they can abuse their power, etc. And little children actually believe these types of things. So what types of things do they actually end up doing is you have young women, especially in public schools, who are going to grow up having a more inflated ego because they have been buttered up by their teachers, while young males are going to be put down, and a lot of them actually lack confidence. And when they lack confidence, they're not going to perform to their level. And if you actually look at the university system as well, you have actually more than 60% of university students who are females. It's not that the males, and I'm not saying that it would be fair to have 50-50, but when you're handicapping the males at a young age and making them feel that they're the inferior gender and they are the ones who are more prone to being unable to control their urges, especially against their female counterparts, you're basically labeling them. And how does a society fail because of that? Well, very simple. If you look at relationships, marriage relationships, romantic relationships, etc., you now see that there is an increasing number of women who are bemoaning that there are not enough good men around, especially when they're past the age of 28 or so. And when you try to reason with some of them and say that there are some decent men out there, they go, no, a lot of them are just bad. I've been through bad experiences. It's because a lot of the good men, you've destroyed a lot of young boys having the potential to be good men because they've always been told that they're bad because they're big boys. And I mean, boys, yes, they have more testosterone. They're more likely to fight with their fists. They're going to beat people up. They're also more competitive, but they're more straightforward in their competitiveness. They don't engage as much in toxic talking behind people's backs and stonewalling people. But a school environment is actually not encouraging these boys to express themselves the way they should, and therefore grow up to be healthy males. And coupled with the increasing divorce rates, it also means that at home they're no better, because they may be living with a relatively passive father figure. And I'm saying father figure because a lot of them may actually end up not living with their fathers because they're divorced and the mother gets the custody. Or they don't even have a father figure at home anymore, and they don't have a father figure at school because a lot of them are dominated by females. So if you really want to stuff up the next generation on the number of levels you can do that at school. One is signal to them that sports matters more than academic performance. Girls are better than boys. Lower the teaching standard by having actually caused teachers to be a profession that is not well rewarded and well respected, so you don't get the top of the crop, you don't get the cream of the crop going in. And furthermore, you have no standard of morals, because the people that they look up to are also as prone to doing wrong and being crooks as anyone on the streets. Now, you might say, well, I'm just bashing the school system and it's not fair, and we should talk about individuals taking responsibility. Absolutely correct. And as I also had mentioned before, not long ago, about the role of the family. Yes, we should actually ask, why are we placing so much responsibility for schools to take care of our children? Isn't it the parents' job? Absolutely should be. The problem though with parents is that a lot of them are now quite tied down with their jobs. They're quite tied down with paying the bills because of the silent inflation that has been going on with fiat currency printing by the central banks, and absolutely abysmal government management of resources, and also the banks, the financial institutions working hand in hand to serve themselves. Like if you look at the Royal Commission on Banking, the fact that you have Commonwealth Bank of Australia, NAB, ANZ, and also AMP, etc. All these companies that have been caught serving themselves in order to boost their own profits and stick it to their customers, charging them fees for no services. Yeah, you have the general population who are underinformed about their own financial position. They also don't understand that it's not that they don't understand. They may not even have that time outside of their jobs, because both are now most households, if they're still married or if they're living together and have children, you have both of them at work. So when they come home, they still got to do the laundry, they got to cook, they got to clean the house. There's not that much time to actually review their children's progress, let alone identify problems with what the schools are teaching them, and pointing it out to and actually complaining to the schools. So how do we actually solve this problem? This one is actually a really hard one, because what you need to do is firstly get people to have the right types of values in life again. And I always believe that it is actually up to the people who are age 55 and above to steer the society back in the right direction. And nowadays, a lot of people who are over 55 are still working very hard because they want to save up for their retirement and have a comfortable life after retirement. So are they going to be able to go back into school to teach their children? No, because they don't have the degree, and generally schools don't hire people. Just like most other most other employers, they're not going to devote resources to people who are within 10 years of retirement. But I always believe leadership positions should actually be dedicated to people above the age 55. So people who lose their jobs in a corporate setting at age 50 or so, if you have a government or if you have a school system where the administrators actually look at this and they go, I will only let's dangle an attractive incentive for people who are aged above 55 who are happily married, they have well-adjusted children. We'll get them to be teachers. Sure, you might only have them in the system for 10 years and they'll go, but 10 years is actually the length of pretty much from a child beginning kindergarten, pretty much close to them leaving high school. And when you have well-adjusted people, so you've got to check their background and see what their children are like, whether they've got any criminal record. Like, young children are impressionable, so therefore get good role models for them. And even if we need one man and one woman in a classroom, especially for children under the age of 10, to teach them, I think that would be absolutely great. It'll be a huge amount of resources to set aside, but hey, let's look at where our resources are currently devoted to. Paying executives and also paying banking executives for fraud. Like all those penalties that the banks are paying for their fraud, I am pretty sure if they're moved towards incentivizing people to teach our next generation, that's enough. We don't even need to raise taxes. We don't need to go and say tax the rich and then pay the poor. But there's enough crooks out there that the penalties that are being paid could be used to fund these types of schemes. And even if not, I'm sure we should encourage some business people to start their own private enterprises to do justice to educate the next generation. Because with good young men and women it'll come through the society, and the society will slowly clean itself up. And if we change our incentives system so that we're not actually awarding sports players $100 million for a particular athlete because they know how to run around on a flat, grassy field holding a ball, and we steer away all those sponsorships for these types of things and focus on awarding individuals who are intellectual and moral role models, I'm very sure that there is hope. But as to how pragmatic and how possible this is, I believe I would be very surprised to see that type of thing be achieved in my lifetime. But at least I'm willing to put it out there. So if some listeners here are in that type of mindset and they have the resources and capability, power to you. I really hope that something could be done. Well, that's it from me, the Sydney Contrarian. Stay tuned for the next episode, and once again, God bless.